Great Demon King. Chapter 29. The Feeling of Contempt. The band of 12, Han Shuo included, finally arrived at the city gates of Zajoski after a long and somewhat tiring trek. They were momentarily awestruck by the sheer enormity of the walls looming before them. Towering and majestic, the gate was built from dense, blood-tinted rock, lending it an ominous hue. No one could say for certain whether its color truly came from the natural stone or was stained by the blood of countless battles, for this gate had witnessed endless conflict over many years. Beyond the gate's formidable threshold, rows of city guards in full-plate armor patrolled atop the walls, their silhouettes jagged against the sky. The fortifications appeared almost excessive. Massive battlements, metal-tipped spikes, and other formidable contraptions lined the stone parapets. From afar, the walls resembled the gaping jaws of some ravenous monster, the iron spikes around the gate arching down like rows of lethal teeth. The very sight sparked a primal unease in passers-by, a clear warning that nothing here was to be taken lightly. Two colossal, pitch-black doors, fused from some unknown material, stood open for now, allowing a bustling flow of traffic into and out of the city. The gates, broad enough to fit 10 horses shoulder to shoulder, throbbed with life. Adventurers carrying weapons, merchants hauling large wagons, and travelers of all races and classes squeezed through, weaving between great lumbering beasts known as earth dragons. These earth dragons, each towering over 5 meters tall and roughly 10 meters long, caught Han Shuo's attention. Their thick, brownish hides were heavily wrinkled, with heads reminiscent of massive elephants, curved tusks protruding from each side of their mouths. Baskets and bundles were strapped along their broad backs, teeming with trade goods of every kind. Fanny noticed how the students looked at these creatures in awe. "Those are earth dragons," she explained, smiling at their wide-eyed expressions. "They're a gentler type of magical creature and can be tamed fairly easily, though they move slowly. Their advantage is their immense strength. They can carry enormous loads, which makes them extremely popular among merchants who have to haul lots of cargo across long distances." "Master Fanny," Jean said, taking a step forward. He glanced at the others, then looked back at her. "Do you mind staying here with the students for a few minutes? I'll head to the officers' quarters to register our presence. I'll also see if we can borrow a few battle steeds. It's going to be difficult reaching Droll by nightfall on foot." His voice carried a note of excitement, especially when he focused on Fanny's graceful profile. Everyone in the necromancy major knew Jean harbored strong feelings for her. Fanny herself was well aware, though she never showed favor or explicit rejection. For his part, Jean seemed convinced that, through consistent displays of devotion, he'd eventually touch her heart. Even now, his gaze lingered on her with clear admiration. Han Shuo, laden with bags and equipment, stifled an internal curse at the way Jean stared. In his own mind, Fanny belonged to him, even though he currently had no position or power to justify such a claim. He felt a faint flash of irritation at Jeannie's open adoration, but he was forced to keep his anger in check. Right now, he was just a meager errand slave, and nowhere near strong enough to challenge Jean's affections. "All right, you go on," Fanny replied, voice neutral but kind. "I'll keep them out of trouble. These walls, no matter how many times I've seen them, never fail to fill me with pride. They've stood firm through countless orc attacks, safeguarding this entire region." With that, Jean departed for the guard post, leaving Fanny and the rest to wait beneath the gate's looming shadow. Han Shuo took the moment of pause to shift his many burdens, stretching his legs and rolling his shoulders. He bent and straightened his knees, rotating his wrists in small circles, performing repetitive moves he'd once seen in muscle-building regimens. Amy, one of the novice mages, noticed the huge packs shifting on his back. "Brian, what in the world are you doing?" she asked, baffled by the sight of him seemingly doing exercises right then and there. Everyone's attention turned to him upon hearing Amy's question. They watched in surprise as Han Shuo continued, unperturbed, with these odd motions, each movement rattling the bundles strapped to his arms, chest, and legs. "I'm just loosening up," Han Shuo answered in a casual tone, making a face of mock cluelessness. "My body felt a little stiff from carrying all this. Moving around helps." Bella, a novice mage who often quarreled with Lisa, gave Han Shuo a frosty look. "Idiot. Be careful with that stuff. If you break or lose something, you'd never be able to pay us back, not even if we sold you off in an auction." "Oh, please," Lisa interjected with an eye roll. "Those items are hardly fragile or we wouldn't have put them on Brian in the first place." "Quit trying to stir up trouble." The two girls glared at each other, about to launch into yet another argument. But Fanny raised a hand, her voice tightening with mild impatience. "Bella, Lisa, Enough. We'll likely face real danger once we leave Zajoski and head into more remote places. If we waste our energy bickering, we'll be in trouble later on. Han Shuo, meanwhile, paid no heed to Bella's snappish remarks. He knew why he was so driven to keep moving. Repeated training, even with a load of equipment, would accelerate his physical development. One of the key ways to break beyond the solid realm in his demonic path. Some minutes later, Jean returned, looking thoroughly aggrieved and empty-handed. His face was taut with anger, and he spoke in a harsh whisper, as if he were trying not to lose his temper entirely. Damn night. They demanded money. He fumed, clenching his fists. Fanny's features shifted with surprise. What do you mean? The Babylon Academy of Magic and Force is the Empire's chief cradle for knights and mages. Many officers stationed here are our graduates. Our agreement with Zajoski should mean we can borrow resources like battle steeds without hassle. Why are they refusing? Jean exhaled sharply. They were ready to comply at first, but then they noticed our identification said we're from the necromancy major. The moment they saw that, they started mocking me, saying we've never contributed anything to the Empire, said we either had to pay them 50 gold coins or walk, called us worthless, useless, basically spat on necromancy. Angry mutters rippled through the group of students. Even those who didn't particularly like necromancy felt a hot spark of indignation hearing that. They were used to being looked down upon within the academy, but being insulted like this out in the open was too much for her. The sense of resentment that came with being considered a failed major dug deep. Fanny looked briefly crestfallen. She glanced at Jean, sighed, and shook her head in resignation. Let's not cause a conflict here. Give them the 50 gold. We truly have fallen far, and we don't have the luxury of a confrontation. Once we get back, we can report this to the dean. But for now, let's do what we need to. Jean's face was a storm of emotion, anger, frustration, a bruised ego. But Fanny's gentle words and pragmatic logic swayed him. He muttered a curse and finally accepted a pouch of 50 gold coins from her, stomping off toward the gates to hand over the money. Han Shuo, watching them go, turned to look at Fanny's crestfallen expression and felt a flare of determination. He silently vowed that he would one day see to it that the necromancy major rose again. If the world dismissed them as useless, he would ensure they feared and respected necromancers, remembering their power. Fanny forced a calm tone once more. Don't feel down, everyone, she said, noticing how the students had fallen silent. There was a time when necromancy was feared and respected in equal measure, but it has indeed fallen on hard times. The major once had many formidable spells and adept necromancers, but wars and internal strife caused heavy losses. Countless high-level necromancers perished, and many irreplaceable tomes were destroyed or lost. This decline didn't happen overnight. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. As for this trip, well, we've heard rumors of a cemetery of death hidden deep in the dark forest. It's said a wise mage once studied necromancy there for many years. If we can locate it, perhaps we'll find tomes or scrolls that could restore some of our lost heritage. If we succeed, the necromancy major might regain some of its old prestige. That's partly why we're venturing out, beyond just giving you a chance to apply your knowledge. The students perked up at that, eyes shining with renewed interest. Though they knew it was risky, the chance of rediscovering powerful necromantic secrets or lost spells stirred a fierce hope within Themin. Han Shuo remained silent but felt a stirring in his own chest. If such a place existed, it might hold invaluable knowledge for enhancing both his demonic cultivation and his necromantic skills. Still, Fanny's thoughts were more realistic than her words suggested. Privately, she recalled that the rumored discoverer of the cemetery had died soon after emerging from the dark forest. The forest itself was a massive, treacherous region teeming with magical beasts, and the exact location of the cemetery was unknown. If it truly contained powerful relics, countless adventurers would soon flock there. Their own group of just 12, most of whom were novice level, might stand little chance in a full-blown scramble for ancient secrets. But she kept these doubts to herself, not wanting to dash the students' morale. They had little time to dwell on it. A light, sweet voice suddenly chimed in from behind them. Hey, aren't these the people from the necromancy major? Going adventuring as well, I see. Why are you all standing around here? Turning, they saw Irene, a student from the light major, approaching on horseback with a small contingent of other robed mages, as well as a few teachers. Among them sat Claude, perched on a tall, sturdy battle steed, his features projecting that cool, practiced grace he often wore. At the sight of the necromancy group, Irene gave them a bright, almost mocking smile. Lisa's face darkened. None of your business, she retorted, voice edged with hostility. Better watch yourself. You're the one who might fall off that horse. Irene broke into a lilting laugh. No need to be rude. I was just observing that you seem stuck here. I suppose you weren't able to borrow decent horses. Her eyes sparkled, and her smirk betrayed a certain glee at the necromancy major's predicament. Well, that makes sense. After all, your major's been dead weight for a while now. Lisa and the other students from necromancy bristled, but they couldn't exactly deny Irene's digs. They had indeed been refused free horses precisely because of necromancy's poor reputation. Standing silently at Fanny's side, Han Shuo clenched his fists at the smug look on Irene's face. Beecher, an adept mage from the Light Major, rode near Irene and gave Fanny a polite nod. Greetings, Master Fanny. We're on our way to hunt some bothersome magical creatures in the dark forest. Good practical experience for our students. Plus it helps keep the Empire's borders safer. So we'll be off. Safe travels. Although his tone sounded civil, Han Shuo could sense the subtle disdain lurking beneath the surface. Shortly after, they clattered away on their robust mounts, leaving behind only a cloud of dust and the faint echoes of snide laughter. Jean returned moments later with 6 mediocre-looking battle steeds in tow. Even after paying 50 gold, the horses they were given were visibly inferior to those used by the Light Major crew. Thinner, smaller, less vigorous. Another undeniable snub. It got worse. Their group comprised 12 people, but there were only 6 horses. Each mount would thus have to carry 2 riders. The students eyed the horses, pairing off quickly, and leaving only Han Shuo, Fanny, Jean, and Bach without a partner. Jean's heart clearly leapt at the chance to share a steed with Fanny, but he was too quick with his words. Bach, you ride with Brian? He said, directing a smug smile at Bach and rubbing his hands in glee. I'll escort Master Fanny, so she'll be more comfortable. Bach's eyes flashed with instant outrage at the suggestion that he share a steed with an errand slave he thoroughly despised. No way. I refuse to sit with that filthy servant. He snapped. Jean opened his mouth to retort, but Fanny only shook her head. A gentle smile danced on her lips. Then I'll ride with Brian, she said calmly. That's settled. Han Shuo practically beamed. Yes, Master Fanny, he said, stepping forward without delay. He maneuvered himself around Jean, who looked crestfallen, and presented himself in front of Fanny, his arms still piled with gear. Excitement welled up in him. He would be sharing a horse with the very woman he couldn't stop thinking about. In that moment, any frustrations about the city guards or the sneers from the Light Major faded. He grinned at the thought of being so close to Fanny, especially knowing it came at Jean's expense. Though he was still too weak to truly compete with Jean, this small moment of triumph felt like a slice of sweet revenge. He looked down, doing his best to mask the satisfaction on his face as he readied the horse for both of them. Even the weight of his gear seemed lighter now. And so, in a swirl of dust and tension, their mismatched group prepared to leave Zajoski at last, setting forth along a road that would take them deeper toward the rumored cemetery, and deeper into the unknown challenges awaiting them in the dark forest.